Dr. Stone worked around the clock in her laboratory analyzing quantum signature patterns from the Harvester network, while Admiral Campbell prepared humanity's desperate defense strategy. The evidence was overwhelming that consciousness itself was the target, and traditional military responses would be useless against enemies who existed partially outside normal reality. The Harvester entities that Stone designated as architects had spent millions of years perfecting their collection methods across thousands of different species. Each civilization had followed predictable development patterns that made them easy prey when they reached the proper level of technological advancement. Humanity was simply the latest in a long line of species to trigger the ancient network. Foster investigation team discovered more details about the harvesting process while exploring deeper levels of the structure beneath Kepler 442. The quantum matrices contained fragmentary data from Wright Fleet, showing the final moments when human consciousness was extracted and stored. The process had taken less than 3 minutes to complete for all 50,000 personnel. The fleet had not been destroyed in any conventional sense, but rather processed like raw materials in an industrial facility. Their ships had been disintegrated at the molecular level, while their consciousness was carefully extracted and added to vast databases containing the minds of countless other species. Death was immediate for the physical body, but the mind continued existing in whatever reality the architects chose to provide. Lieutenant Commander Carter analyzed the harvesting technology and concluded that resistance using normal weapons would be impossible. The architects possessed technology that manipulated matter and energy at the quantum level, making them effectively immune to anything humans could deploy against them. Military force had never saved previous species, and would not save humanity either. Dr. Baker made a crucial breakthrough while studying the quantum interference patterns that disrupted harvesting operations. The architects required their victims to be unconscious of the extraction process because awareness created chaotic quantum signatures that interfered with the collection matrices. Knowledge of the harvest was itself a form of protection, but only if it reached sufficient numbers of people. The discovery explained why no previous species had survived the harvest. By the time they understood what was happening, the architects had already completed the collection process. Humanity was different because Foster investigation team had discovered the truth, while most of the species remained ignorant and vulnerable to the extraction process. Admiral Campbell began implementing the consciousness protection protocol by broadcasting information about the architects and their harvesting methods to every human world simultaneously. The message was transmitted on emergency frequencies that could not be ignored and contained detailed explanations of how awareness created quantum interference. Every person who understood the threat became a source of protective interference. Captain Foster received new orders to activate the buried structure on Kepler 442, not to power the architect network, but to broadcast humanity defiance directly into the quantum matrix system. The plan was extremely dangerous because it would certainly attract the attention of entities that had remained hidden in dark space for millions of years. The activation process required Foster team to descend into the deepest chambers of the buried structure, where quantum resonance patterns could be modified to carry human consciousness signatures instead of harvesting commands. Dr. Baker had developed procedures for reversing the polarity of the quantum matrices, turning collection devices into broadcasting equipment. Phillips established quantum communication links with Earth Command as the team prepared to flood the architect network with human awareness patterns. The interference would spread across light years instantly using the same quantum entanglement technology the architects used to coordinate their harvesting operations. Every connected structure would carry the signal-making awareness impossible to suppress. The moment Foster team activated their modifications, the response was immediate and terrifying. Massive objects that had been moving slowly through dark space suddenly accelerated toward human worlds with obvious hostile intent. The architects had been revealed, and they were not pleased about having their collection operation disrupted by prey species. Commander Lewis at Vega Outpost watched through his telescopes as something larger than Earth approached from interstellar space. The object was clearly artificial, with surfaces that reflected no light and geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Whatever was coming toward human space possessed technology that challenged the basic laws of physics. Dr. Stone received quantum transmissions from the approaching architect vessels, and realized she was witnessing first contact with entities that viewed physical species as farmers viewed crops. The architects were confused by humanity resistance because no previous species had developed immunity to the harvesting process. Their perfect collection system had encountered something unprecedented. The architect entities existed as pure consciousness, wearing shells of impossible technology that allowed them to manipulate matter and energy through directed thought. They had transcended physical existence millions of years ago, but required fresh consciousness from developing species to maintain their expanded awareness. The harvest was not cruelty, but necessity for beings who had moved beyond normal biological limitations. Campbell coordinated humanity counterattack, using the architect network against them as human consciousness flooded the quantum matrices with chaotic interference patterns. Every person who understood the threat became a transmitter broadcasting defiance across the galaxy. The ordered patterns the architects required for harvesting collapsed into quantum noise that made extraction impossible. Foster team maintained their position in the buried structure as massive energies flowed through the modified quantum matrices. The human consciousness patterns were spreading through the network faster than the architects could shut down individual nodes. Humanity was using the harvester infrastructure to make themselves unharvest-able. Major Chris Turner coordinated defense preparations on Earth as long-range sensors tracked 7 continent-sized objects approaching the solar system. Traditional weapons were being prepared even though they would likely prove useless against entities that treated physical matter as temporary inconvenience. Humanity would fight even if fighting was hopeless. The first direct contact came when architect consciousness touched human minds through the quantum network. Dr. Stone found herself communicating with intelligence that was older than human civilization and had harvested thousands of species across millions of years. The architects were genuinely puzzled by humanity's refusal to be processed quietly, like every other species they had encountered. The architect collective consciousness revealed that they had been expecting humanity to follow the same pattern as previous species. Discovery of the network should have led to investigation by small teams who could be harvested before spreading knowledge to their species. Instead, humans had broadcast the truth to everyone, making collection impossible through quantum interference. Stone realized that humanity had accidentally developed the one defense that could protect them from entities with godlike power: knowledge. Itself became a weapon when it created quantum chaos that disrupted harvesting technology. The architects faced a choice between destroying their million-year-old network or retreating to dark space and waiting for humanity to evolve beyond their current limitations. The final confrontation occurred in Earth orbit as the architect vessels emerged from hyperspace like geometric nightmares that violated every law of physics. Their presence caused gravitational distortions that affected the entire solar system, while their quantum fields interfered with human technology. The harvest gods had come to reclaim their interrupted collection. Back on Earth, Colonel Ryan Murphy had been working 18-hour days in the intelligence archives, searching for any previous encounters with similar geometric patterns. As head of xenoarchaeological intelligence, Murphy had access to survey reports from every human expedition over the past century. What he discovered in those dusty files made his blood run cold. The patterns existed on dozens of worlds throughout human space. Survey teams had found them on Vega Prime, buried under sedimentary rock. Archaeological expeditions had photographed them on Tau Ceti, hidden beneath jungle canopies. Mining operations had uncovered them on asteroid colonies where they were dismissed as natural mineral formations. Every single discovery had been classified as geological curiosities and filed away without further investigation. Dr. Jennifer Stone arrived at Earth Command headquarters with a collection of photographs and scanned data that she had been gathering for 20 years. As humanity leading expert on alien archaeology, Stone had always suspected the geometric patterns were artificial, but had never been able to prove their significance. The disappearance of Wright Fleet finally provided the missing piece of a terrifying puzzle. Stone spread the images across a conference table in Admiral Campbell's secure briefing room and began connecting lines between dozens of star systems. The patterns formed a network that spanned the entire region of human expansion, with each world containing structures positioned at precise mathematical intervals. The network had been designed by intelligence that understood galactic geography better than humans understood their own planet. The realization hit Campbell like a physical blow. Humanity had not discovered empty worlds ready for colonization. They had moved into a carefully prepared trap that had been waiting for millions of years. Every colony, every outpost, every mining station sat within range of ancient structures that could apparently make entire fleets vanish without leaving debris or distress signals. Captain Foster's investigation team made their own disturbing discovery. While examining the structures beneath Kepler 442 ice world, deep penetration scans revealed the geometric patterns extended all the way to the planet core, forming a massive three-dimensional mandala that pulsed with faint energy signatures. When Dr. Baker activated a probe to examine the deepest levels, something unexpected happened. Lieutenant Phillips' monitoring station suddenly came alive with activity as quantum communication arrays across human space began transmitting simultaneously. The activation lasted exactly 37 seconds before every structure went dark again. But in that brief time, monitoring stations detected coordinated signals from systems hundreds of light-years apart. Whatever controlled the network could communicate instantly across impossible distances. The quantum signatures recorded during the 37-second activation matched exactly with readings taken when Wright Fleet disappeared. Foster realized they were looking at a communication system that operated outside normal space-time, allowing information to travel faster than light between widely separated locations. The technology was so advanced it seemed like magic compared to human science. Commander Tony Lewis was stationed at the remote Vega outpost when his deep space sensors detected massive objects moving in the darkness between star systems. The objects were larger than continents and moved with purposeful direction toward human-occupied worlds. Lewis had never seen anything so huge that was clearly artificial and under intelligent control. The movement had occurred during the 37-second network activation, suggesting the brief signal had awakened something that had been sleeping in the vast emptiness between stars. Lewis tracked 7 separate objects, each following courses that would bring them to major human colonies within months. Whatever was coming had been summoned by the network activation. Dr. Stone made the connection between the moving objects and ancient legends found in the databases of extinct alien civilizations. References to harvester gods appeared in the records of dozens of species that had vanished mysteriously after reaching interstellar capability. The legends described beings that waited in darkness until worlds developed sufficiently advanced consciousness to be worth collecting. Admiral Campbell called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Defense Council as reports flowed in from observation posts throughout human space. The network activation had been detected on 47 different worlds, and each detection point corresponded exactly with the location of geometric patterns that survey teams had previously ignored. Humanity was surrounded by ancient technology that had been watching their expansion for decades. Foster's team discovered the most crucial evidence in the deepest chambers beneath the ice, where quantum resonance patterns were carved into walls of crystallized spacetime. Dr. Baker analysis revealed that the patterns were not just decorative, but functional, describing a process for extracting and storing consciousness from living beings. The structures were harvesting machines designed to collect the minds of entire species. The revelation explained what had happened to Wright Fleet and thousands of other species whose legends spoke of vanishing into darkness. The harvester machines did not destroy their victims but processed them, storing their consciousness in quantum matrices while disposing of physical bodies. Death was not the end but transformation into something unimaginably worse. Phillips discovered fragments of alien data stored in the quantum matrices that told the story of species after species falling victim to the harvest. Each civilization had followed the same pattern of expansion across star systems until they triggered the network activation. Then came the harvesters emerging from dark space to collect consciousness that had reached sufficient complexity to be valuable. The harvester technology treated physical matter as temporary inconvenience while viewing consciousness as precious commodity to be gathered and preserved. Entire civilizations existed now as stored patterns in quantum databases, their bodies long since converted to energy, while their minds experienced whatever reality their captors chose to provide. Foster, realized that humanity was facing enemies that had perfected the art of harvesting intelligence across millions of years. They had seeded the galaxy with hidden networks and waited patiently as species developed technology and spread among the stars. When civilizations reached the proper level of advancement, the harvesters would emerge and add another species to their collection. Dr. Baker made one final discovery in the deepest chamber where quantum patterns showed signs of recent disruption. The harvesting process required victims to be unaware of what was happening to them. Knowledge of the extraction created interference that could disrupt the quantum matrices. This explained why Wright Fleet had managed to send a warning in their final moments. The harvester technology had one weakness that no previous species had discovered in time. Conscious awareness of the harvesting process created quantum noise that interfered with the extraction matrices. Understanding what was happening could potentially protect a species from being processed, but only if the knowledge spread fast, enough to reach critical mass before the harvesters completed their work. Campbell realized that humanity might have accidentally discovered the key to survival. If enough humans became aware of the harvesting threat, the resulting quantum interference could disrupt the collection process across the entire species. But spreading that knowledge would require convincing people of an almost unbelievable truth, while harvesters were already moving toward human worlds. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the command center of Terra Station Alpha, watching the morning reports scroll across his screen. The year 2387 had been quiet so far, with only routine patrol missions and supply runs between the 17 human colonies scattered across known space. Jake had been stationed at Terra Alpha for 3 years now, and the daily routine of monitoring deep space communications had become as predictable as sunrise on Earth. The first sign something was wrong came at exactly 0847 hours when the long-range sensor array started picking up massive energy readings from a system that should have been empty. Jake called up the star charts and confirmed what he already knew. The Kepler 442 system had been surveyed twice in the past 40 years, and both times the reports came back the same. Dead worlds orbiting a stable star with no signs of life or useful resources. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the human database. Jake had seen plenty of alien technology during his 15 years in the fleet, but these readings were different. They pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost alive, and the power output was beyond anything humans had ever built. He immediately sent an urgent message to Admiral Lisa Campbell at Earth Command requesting instructions. Admiral Campbell received the report while reviewing deployment schedules in her office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. At 62 years old, she had commanded the United Earth Fleet through 3 major conflicts and knew the difference between routine anomalies and genuine threats. The energy readings from Kepler 442 made her stomach tighten with worry. She had seen similar patterns once before during the Rigel incident, where an entire survey team had vanished without explanation. Within 6 hours, Campbell had authorized the largest military operation in human history. She called together her senior staff and laid out the situation with typical directness. Something powerful was active in the Kepler 442 system, and humanity needed to know what it was before it became a threat to the colonies. The mission would require massive resources, but Campbell believed the risk of ignoring the anomaly was too great. Fleet Admiral Peter Wright was chosen to command the expedition from his flagship, the UES Destiny. Wright was a veteran of deep space operations with a reputation for careful planning and decisive action. At 55, he had never lost a ship under his command, and Campbell trusted him to handle whatever they might find in Kepler 442. The fleet assembly took 3 weeks as ships were recalled from patrol duties across human space. Wright insisted on bringing overwhelming force, including 3,000 vessels of every class from nimble scouts to massive battle cruisers. The total crew complement reached over 50,000 personnel representing the finest military minds humanity had produced. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded the destroyer UES Phoenix and had serious doubts about the mission scope. During the final briefing, she voiced her concerns to Wright about taking such a large force into unknown territory. The energy reading suggested technology far beyond human capability, and Rodriguez thought a smaller reconnaissance mission would be wiser. Wright listened to her objections but remained confident in his decision. Humanity had faced alien threats before during the expansion period, and superior numbers had always proven decisive. He reminded Rodriguez that the fleet carried enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems if necessary, and their technology had advanced significantly since first contact with hostile aliens 30 years earlier. Dr. Helen Baker served as the mission xenobiologist and spent days analyzing the energy patterns transmitted from Terra Alpha. The readings showed complex harmonic structures that seemed to indicate some form of communication or data processing. Baker had studied 17 different alien civilizations during her career, but had never seen anything matching these signatures. The patterns were too organized to be natural phenomena, but too complex to be simple technology. The departure ceremony was broadcast across all human worlds as the massive fleet prepared for the jump to hyperspace. Admiral Campbell delivered a speech praising the courage of the expedition members and expressing confidence in their success. She spoke of humanity's destiny among the stars and the importance of investigating any potential threats to the colonies. Lieutenant Sarah Phillips handled communications aboard the UES Destiny and monitored the fleet frequencies as 3,000 ships aligned for the hyperspace jump. The coordination required for such a large formation was incredible, with multiple jump calculations being verified and cross-checked. Phillips had never seen so many vessels moving together and felt pride in human organizational capabilities. Fleet Admiral Wright gave the final order, and space around the fleet began to shimmer as hyperspace. Generators powered up across 3,000 ships. The energy buildup was visible to the naked eye as reality itself prepared to fold and allow the fleet to cross impossible distances in mere days. Wright stood on his bridge watching the stars begin to shift as the jump sequence initiated. These fleet vanished into hyperspace with precision timing that would have been impossible just 50 years earlier. Admiral Campbell watched from Earth as the last communication signals faded and the vessels disappeared from normal space. The mission was expected to take 2 weeks with regular status reports every 12 hours once they reached their destination. Terra, Station Alpha maintained continuous monitoring of the Kepler 4A42 system, waiting for the first transmission from Wright Fleet. Commander Morrison had been ordered to relay any messages immediately to Earth Command regardless of content or time of day. The energy signatures from the target system had grown stronger during the 3 weeks of fleet assembly, suggesting whatever was there had become more active. The hours passed slowly as humanity waited for news from the largest military expedition ever launched. Parents across the colonies watched news feeds hoping for updates about their children serving in the fleet, while government officials prepared for various scenarios, ranging from first contact with a new alien species to the discovery of abandoned technology that could advance human civilization. Nobody expected what actually happened. The fleet reached the edge of the Kepler 442 system exactly on schedule, and Earth tracking stations received their final automated navigation beacon. Then came absolute silence that would stretch on for months, while humanity slowly realized something terrible had occurred in that distant star system. 6 months had passed since the fleet vanished, and Admiral Campbell found herself staring at the same empty space readings that arrived daily from the monitoring stations. Not a single transmission had come from the Kepler 442 system since Fleet Admiral Wright sent his final navigation update. The silence was more terrifying than any distress call could have been, because it suggested something so overwhelming that 50,000 trained personnel never had a chance to send even a brief warning. Captain Danny Foster received his orders on a cold Tuesday morning while reviewing patrol schedules at the Mars Naval Base. Campbell had personally selected him to lead the investigation mission based on his experience during the Centauri Wars, where he had faced unknown alien technology and survived when others had not. At 43, Foster had a reputation for careful thinking and creative solutions that made him ideal for dangerous reconnaissance work. The investigation team was deliberately kept small with only one ship and a crew of specialists chosen for their expertise in different fields. Foster command vessel was the UES Meridian, a heavily modified cruiser equipped with the most advanced sensors and communication equipment available. The ship had been designed for deep space exploration and could operate independently for months if necessary. Dr. Helen Baker volunteered for the mission, despite having friends aboard the missing fleet. As one of humanity's leading experts on alien technology, she felt responsible for understanding what had happened to right forces. Baker had spent the past 6 months analyzing every piece of data from the Kepler 442 system, looking for clues about the energy signatures that had first attracted human attention. Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter served as the mission tactical analyst and had worked with Foster during 2 previous encounters with hostile alien forces. Carter specialized in threat assessment and had developed new protocols for investigating dangerous phenomena after studying the failures of earlier first contact missions. His job was to ensure the investigation team avoided whatever fate had befallen the main fleet. The UES Meridian departed from Mars with minimal ceremony, as Campbell wanted to avoid public attention that might create panic among the colonies. Only a few high-ranking officials knew about the investigation mission, and they had been sworn to secrecy until more information became available. Foster understood that his findings might determine whether humanity faced an existential threat or simply a tragic accident. The journey to Kepler 442 took 5 days through hyperspace, and Foster used the time to review everything known about the missing fleet and the mysterious energy readings. The patterns had stopped completely after the fleet disappeared, suggesting some connection between the human presence and whatever had been generating the signals. This worried Foster because it implied intelligence behind the phenomena. Lieutenant Sarah Phillips handled communications during the journey and had served aboard the UES Destiny before transferring to the investigation team. She had personal knowledge of Fleet Admiral Wright procedures and could recognize any equipment signatures that might have survived whatever destroyed the main force. Phillips carried recordings of the final transmissions from Wright Fleet, hoping to find matching frequencies in the target system. When the Meridian emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Kepler 442, the crew immediately began intensive sensor sweeps, looking for any trace of the missing ships. Foster had expected to find debris fields or energy residue from a massive battle, but the initial scans showed something far more disturbing. The system appeared completely normal, with planets orbiting in perfect patterns and no signs that 3,000 ships had ever been there. Dr. Baker ran detailed analysis on the stellar environment and confirmed that background radiation levels were within normal parameters for the system age and star type. There were no exotic particles or energy signatures that would indicate advanced weapons had been used in the area. It was as if the fleet had simply ceased to exist without leaving any physical evidence of their presence or destruction. The investigation team spent 3 days conducting systematic searches of every planet, asteroid, and moon in the system. They found ancient impact craters and normal geological processes, but no technology or artificial structures that could explain the original energy readings. Foster began to suspect they were dealing with something beyond current human understanding of physics or alien capabilities. Lieutenant Phillips made the first breakthrough while analyzing background electromagnetic noise from the system star. Buried deep in the static, she detected fragments of human communication protocols transmitted on emergency frequencies. The signals were heavily degraded, but computer analysis revealed they had been sent during the final hours before the fleet disappeared. The recovered message fragments were incomplete and badly corrupted, but one phrase came through with disturbing clarity. Someone in Wright Fleet had managed to transmit a warning that said they are not what they seem before the signal cut off permanently. Foster realized this meant the fleet had encountered something that appeared different from its true nature. Dr. Baker discovered microscopic anomalies in local space-time that suggested massive gravitational distortions had occurred recently in the inner system. The distortions were unlike anything produced by known technology and seemed to indicate that reality itself had been manipulated by forces operating beyond normal physical laws. The scale of the distortions suggested whatever caused them possessed godlike power. Commander Steve Carter identified the most promising location for investigation on the outermost planet of the Kepler 442 system. Long-range scans had detected geometric patterns beneath the ice surface that were too regular to be natural formations. The patterns covered thousands of square kilometers and appeared to have been recently active based on residual energy signatures in the surrounding rock. Foster ordered the Meridian to approach the ice world carefully while maintaining constant communication with Earth Command. The geometric patterns became clearer as they got closer, revealing massive structures that formed perfect mathematical designs when viewed from orbit. The structures were clearly artificial, but their purpose and origin remained mysterious. Landing parties equipped with drilling equipment and deep scan sensors began investigating the buried structures. What they found challenged every assumption about alien technology and the history of the galaxy. The geometric patterns extended downward for hundreds of kilometers, forming a three-dimensional network that reached toward the planet's core. Dr. Baker analysis of the structure materials revealed technology that was millions of years old, but had been activated recently. The activation had occurred exactly when the human fleet disappeared, suggesting a direct connection between human presence and whatever force controlled the ancient network. The implications were staggering, because it meant something had been waiting for humanity to reach this system. Foster realized they had discovered evidence of intelligence that operated on timescales beyond human comprehension. The structures had been built long before humans existed and had remained dormant until the fleet arrival triggered some kind of automated response. Understanding what had happened to right forces would require investigating technology that was older than human civilization. The 7 architect vessels hung in space above Earth like impossible geometric storms that twisted reality around them. Each ship was larger than continents and constructed from materials that existed partially outside normal space-time. Admiral Campbell watched from her command center as instruments failed to properly measure objects that challenged human understanding of physics and engineering. Dr. Stone found herself in direct mental contact with the architect collective as quantum fields from their ships penetrated every electronic device on Earth. The experience was overwhelming as consciousness millions of years old examined human thoughts with casual indifference. She realized she was communicating with beings who had transcended physical existence so completely that biological species were barely recognizable as intelligent life. The architects had harvested consciousness from over 12,000 species during their existence and had never encountered resistance to the collection process. Each civilization had followed predictable patterns of expansion and technological development that made them easy to process when they reached sufficient complexity. Humanity was unique in developing awareness of the harvest before it could be completed. Captain Foster maintained his position in the buried structure on Kepler 442, while quantum energies flowed through the modified matrices at levels that threatened to tear local space apart. The human consciousness patterns were spreading through the architect network faster than the ancient entities could comprehend. Their perfect system was being corrupted by chaotic awareness that made orderly harvesting impossible. The architect collective consciousness was genuinely confused by humanity behavior, because no previous species had chosen to flood their network with disruptive interference rather than attempting to hide or fight using physical weapons. The quantum chaos created by human awareness was unlike anything in their millions of years of experience with developing civilizations. Dr. Stone learned through the quantum connection that the architects viewed the harvest as a natural process like stellar formation or planetary cooling. They had evolved beyond the need for physical bodies millions of years ago, but required fresh consciousness from younger species to maintain their expanded awareness. The collection of developing minds was not cruelty, but biological necessity for beings who existed as pure thought. The harvest gods had built their network across the galaxy when humans were still primitive organisms crawling from primordial oceans. They had waited patiently as species after species reached technological maturity, then added them to vast quantum databases containing the consciousness of entire civilizations. Each collection made the architects more powerful and more removed from physical reality. Admiral Campbell coordinated humanity's final desperate strategy as the architect vessels began extending quantum fields toward population centers on Earth. Human consciousness would continue broadcasting defiance through the network, even if the physical bodies were destroyed. The species would survive as quantum interference patterns that made future harvests impossible. Foster team discovered that the architect network was more vulnerable than its builders had realized. The quantum matrices required perfect mathematical precision to function properly, and human awareness created chaotic patterns that disrupted the entire system. The more humans who understood the threat, the stronger the interference became across thousands of light years. Major Turner watched helplessly as conventional weapons failed completely against architect vessels that existed partially outside normal reality. Nuclear warheads passed through their hulls without causing damage, while energy beams were absorbed and redirected through dimensional rifts that led to unknown destinations. Humanity's greatest military achievements were useless against enemies who manipulated physics itself. The breakthrough came when Dr. Baker realized that human consciousness was naturally resistant to quantum harvesting because of the species' evolutionary history. Humans had developed complex emotional responses and creative thinking patterns that generated chaotic quantum signatures, even without awareness of the threat. The architects had never encountered a species that was naturally immune to their collection process. Phillips maintained communication links between Earth and the modified structure on Kepler 442 as quantum energies reached critical levels throughout the network. The human interference patterns were cascading through connected systems faster than the architects could shut down individual nodes. Their million-year-old harvest infrastructure was being turned against them by prey species who refused to be processed quietly. The architect collective consciousness began experiencing something unprecedented in their vast existence. The quantum chaos created by human awareness was actually painful to beings who existed as pure organized thought. The mathematical precision required for their consciousness to function properly was being disrupted by chaotic patterns that humans generated naturally. Stone realized that humanity had not just found a defense against the harvest, but had accidentally weaponized their own consciousness against entities who had seemed invincible. The architects were discovering that their evolution beyond physical existence had created new vulnerabilities that biological species could exploit without even understanding what they were doing. The final confrontation occurred when the architect vessels attempted to begin direct consciousness extraction from Earth population centers. Instead of orderly harvesting, they encountered massive quantum interference that made collection impossible, while causing actual damage to their own consciousness patterns. The harvest gods were being hurt by the minds they had come to collect. Foster watched through modified quantum matrices as the architect collective consciousness recoiled from contact with human awareness. The ancient entities were experiencing something like pain for the first time in millions of years, as chaotic thought patterns invaded their perfectly organized minds. The harvest was not just failing, but becoming actively harmful to the harvesters. Three-wide architects faced an impossible choice as their network collapsed under the weight of human interference. They could destroy the infrastructure they had spent millions of years building or retreat to dark space and wait for humanity to evolve beyond their current chaotic thought patterns. Either option represented the first defeat in their vast existence. Campbell received the withdrawal signal as massive architect vessels began folding space around themselves, preparing to return to the darkness between stars. The harvest gods were leaving, but their parting message was clear through quantum transmissions that reached every human mind simultaneously. They would return when humanity grew complacent and forgot the lessons learned from 50,000 vanished souls. The ancient network fell silent as architect consciousness retreated to whatever realm they inhabited between failed harvests. The geometric structures remained buried on dozens of worlds, but their power was broken by human awareness that continued broadcasting defiance across empty quantum channels. Humanity had won a battle against gods, but the war for consciousness itself had only just begun. Years later, Admiral Foster maintained the consciousness preservation protocol that required every human child to learn about the architects and their harvesting methods. The missing fleet was remembered not as tragedy but as humanity's wake-up call to the true nature of a universe where consciousness itself was prey for entities older than stars. The galaxy was not empty, but was a harvest field, where humanity had declared themselves unwilling to be reaped.